Good evening, and welcome to another broadcast of Around the Lake. This is a news roundtable show of the Ithaca Times and the Finger Lakes community newspapers. And with us today are Keri Blakinger and Glynis Hart, I know your name, and Mike Nocella. And we are going to be talking about the recent denial of tax abatements to Jason Fane in the city. The cover story this week in the Ithaca Times, which is agriculinary tourism. A visit from Tom Reed, which sounds like bad news, and a recent graduation in the area that most people will not have heard about. And we'll be talking about merging Trumansburg and South Seneca football and ambulance billing, which is always a contentious issue up in Trumansburg. So first, let's start with a fun story of the week, Jason Fane.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, and you had covered the meeting, and you were under the impression that this was a green light, but that was not the case.
I was glad that Jim Dennis agreed with me anyway.
Right, so what happened was there were 5 IDA members. What does IDA stand for?
Industrial Development Agency.
Making the vote, and it was 3 votes to 2 votes no.
What was the request? What was
this was for Jason Fane's proposed apartment complex near the Ithaca Police Department, and so he's said he wouldn't go through with this project without a tax abatement, and this is through the city and county's CTAP tax abatement program, and according to the stipulations for that program, his project fit the bill to a T, pretty much.
For the city,
and so that's why Bill and everyone and a lot of others thought this would go through, but I think some personal
well, that's what it looks like.
Personal feelings got in the way.
Personal feelings, or maybe.
I mean, that's the inference. History. A lot of people came forward about other things.
Right. The reasons that they went on the record as saying, because they weren't going to go on the record saying they voted no because they don't like Jason Fane, were more that wasn't green enough.
Right.
The location itself, that it's on a steep slope.
Right.
And there was another one.
And not multi-use.
And not multi-use. Yeah. As we go through this form-based craze.
And I'm afraid I rather took the IDA to task for that stuff. They really seemed like straw men to me. They weren't really very sound arguments. And I don't know, they really don't have anything when you look at their rules, you know, when you're going into the application process. There's not a whole lot about that.
Right, and I mean, the impression I got, or how I read it, was their reasons for voting against it wasn't really what they were being asked to consider for a yes or no.
Right.
I mean, they were looking at stuff that the city had already looked at. Mm-hmm. I mean, the things they voted against or voted against us for were things that city planning, if they thought they were problems, that was their job to do. They already went through it, as Jim Dennis said, that already went through the city's muster, and the city strongly supports it. So under that, I don't think there was grounds to.
Well, you and I have both sat through the planning and development board meetings.
Right.
And those guys are really tough on developers. Yeah. I mean, the community is in good hands. Yeah. You know, they're quite the gatekeeper crowd.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of changes made, making this, you know, a greener project in the sense that they got them to leave a half acre along the creek vegetated and to replace invasive species with native species. They asked for other changes and got them.
Right, and it's not like they're partial to Jason Fane. I think when he pitched his idea for a 12-story building, Joanne Cornish said, "Not a snowball's chance in hell this ever goes through." So, if it went through them, that's pretty good reason to think that, you know, they support it.
So why don't they like Jason Fane?
I think
if you just moved to Ithaca.
Yeah, I mean, this is something.
Who is this Jason Fane guy?
As being a newbie to Ithaca, this is as I've said before, I've been learning about why most people don't have a very good impression of Jason Fane. But
well, what have people told you?
You know, that he's holding parts of the city hostage in terms of having empty storefronts and
his rents are very high.
Yes, and his rents are very high, and
his contracts are really kind of inquisitional.
And just when he's had interactions with the public, I don't think he comes off any more favorable.
Yeah.
That was your first
Yeah.
encounter with him.
Yeah, but on the other hand, as a professional, he's been.
He follows the letter.
Yeah.
He follows the letter of the
Yeah,
law.
he's always given.
Well, that
me-
is true, because that was one thing that one of the opponents, at least one of them, stated specifically that yes, this follows the letter, but it doesn't follow the spirit of downtown development.
Right.
Or of what the IDA or what the county wants. The green initiative. This whole 2030 plan to reduce the carbon footprint of the county to a certain size, much smaller than it is or was several years ago. And so buildings like this just don't help, is the thought. And they don't help by putting. His didn't help by putting, he didn't put LED lighting in, for example, as far as I know, and he didn't insulate it or anything like that, which is the usual sort of green stuff. But he does put it downtown so that people can walk around and not use their cars.
Well,
and so
I guess
that's green.
I would have a question. What is the goal of giving tax abatements? I mean, the complaint about
stated goal?
The complaint about Mr. Fane is that he has, that he'll write off these properties, these empty storefronts that are too expensive for new businesses to move in.
Yeah.
So for him to say, I can't put in a multi-unit housing complex because I don't have an abatement, did anyone bring that up?
Yeah, the
Nobody
main
does.
criteria for meeting the tax abatement or under the CTAP program is that it stimulates private sector investment, adds to the tax base, and it creates density where they've outlined they want density.
Right.
And this project met those.
Met those things.
Yes.
I mean, effectively, what it looked like they did was hold him hostage because his behavior has been reprehensible. They said, we're not going to give you the tax abatements. You didn't get in the spirit of our program,
Right.
and so no tax abatements for you.
And while Jason told me that he doesn't plan to pursue any kind of legal action in terms of whether this was a personal attack, Michael Stamm, who's the president of TCAD,
Yeah.
told me that there's a bigger problem here in which the IDA and the city aren't seeing eye to eye on what the
purposes
Right.
of their sort of.
So I think it sounds
development
like they're going to kind of meet and go over what happened, so that something like this doesn't happen again.
Okay. Well, we'll probably come back to it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike. So, Tom Reed visited Danby. You were there.
It was beautiful. After all these
Beautiful.
Yes.
Like a hockey fight.
Yes, totally. After covering all these slow board meetings, what you really want is a fight.
Okay.
And Danby delivered.
I hate to say this,
thank
but I
you,
know what you
Danby.
mean. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
We don't go down to Danby.
Right,
often.
well,
I've
I
never
have
been
put
to
one of their town board meetings on my schedule for next
You probably
month.
have, but you didn't know it.
Well, because of this, I put one of their town board meetings on my schedule for
Okay,
next month.
good.
Wow, they were
Good.
that impressive.
Yes, they were. So, somebody in the back row, when he was talking at one point, called him an asshole. And,
Which is nothing new for Tom Reed.
Did he react?
No, he acted like
He's
he
used to
didn't
it.
hear it. And it is possible that he didn't, but I thought it was loud enough that he would have heard. And then towards the end of it, somebody, it's in the same room as the library for Danby, and somebody came in to return DVDs, and on his way out, the guy stopped 6 feet from Tom Reed and started screaming at him about George Bush's responsibility for the Iraq War. And then he, insulted him and stomped out angrily without waiting for a response.
Were any of these people Martha Robertson?
No.
No.
That would.
She's a nice lady.
No, but Irene Stein was there. She's the head of the Democratic Party in Tompkins County, and she really took him to task for the Cromnibus bill. The Cromnibus bill that the House passed, and since then the Senate has passed, was some continuing resolutions along with a regular omnibus spending bill. And it repealed some of the existing restrictions on the banking industry, and she really took him to task for that. He did say that he thought that there should be some bankers in jail, and but he was, despite that, fundamentally against regulations, and people really took him to task for that. At one point, he said that he was against regulations because that can actually make it easier to hide for financial companies.
Because the report gets so long.
If you have a 500-page IPO prospectus, then you actually can hide information on page 492 where nobody reads it. And so in some cases, regulation and transparency can be worse.
I don't think he thought of that himself. Yeah.
And let's see. There was some discussion of trucking regulations, because that was also included in this omnibus bill. Now truckers don't have the same sleeping requirements. If they worked so many days, they had to take 2 days off.
They had to have 10 hours of
That would be
sleep or something
sensitive
like
around here.
Yeah, I think
And it was. That's exactly what people really took him to task for.
Mayor Myrick, I think, recently bashed that, saying, this is
Right.
just going to encourage something like simians
Right.
to happen again. So.
And some people were really unhappy about that. One person asked about Citizens United and corporate personhood.
Oh.
And he
Actually, read us his response. It's really kind of a gem.
Yeah, he said I wrote that he voiced some concerns with restricting campaign spending and corporate personhood, saying, where do you draw the line? How would you define what is good corporate privileges versus abusive corporate structures? And then he segued into encouraging people to vote to solve the problem. He said he didn't, he just segued into voter turnout.
Again, I mean, it
Which he
sounds
did a
like he's
few
been to
times.
these seminars on
He did
how to dodge questions.
Yes, he did that a few times, but then there were some people that were not going to let him dodge
No,
questions.
he doesn't do it very
Joanne
well.
Cipolla Dennis and her wife were, they were really good.
Tag team.
They really took him to task, and when he didn't answer, they were like, answer the question. And they were asking him about a bill about marriage equality, so that if you are married in New York, it would be recognized elsewhere. And his response on that was pretty poor. His response was that
He's against it.
Well, he said, well, I'm against the language of that bill. And she
Right.
said, so you don't want us to have the
It's
same
in
rights that, right? You don't want us to have the same rights that you and your wife do when you travel? And he was like, well, I'm not opposed to the concept, I'm opposed to the language. I think it leaves it too open for abuse and potential lawsuits.
All right, well,
For frivolous lawsuits.
We got what we expected from Tom
Yes.
Reed.
Yeah.
So you had another thing that you were covering.
Yes. The reason I wasn't here for last week's show is because I was at the Auburn prison graduation.
See, this is the graduation you didn't think
Yes,
about.
exactly. And
This is a Cornell program.
yes, it's so they take what they got this time was associate's degrees. They get Cornell credits, but then the Cornell credits are transferred to Cayuga Community College for them to get a 2-year degree.
Okay.
Nobody's gotten any 4-year degrees yet. And it takes, this is only the second graduation they've had. It takes quite a few years to get those credits together.
Mm-hmm. How many people in this class, roughly?
I think it was 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so they still stay in jail. They're not graduating from the jail, literally.
That would be great, huh? Everybody would
No,
enroll.
some of them have a lot of time left, and some of the speeches were really moving. And some of them, it's really apparent that they're not the men that they were when they were sentenced.
Yeah.
Some of them have done a lot of time, but they've all come a long way, and they were all expressing how grateful they were for the opportunity, which is actually because of Doris Buffett. She does the funding for all this. Warren Buffett's sister.
Yeah.
Does the
And
funding
she was
for
there.
Yes, she was. She was there.
Yeah, I was
She
impressed
was
by
funny.
that.
I was,
Why was she funny?
I don't remember what she said, but she had us laughing when she gave a brief speech. Yeah.
I was intrigued by the picture of the woman embracing her son as
Oh,
he's wearing
right, yes.
his cap. And during the ceremony, were they able to mingle? How did they maintain that sort of
and
prison
standardly
division?
in prison, unlike in county jail, standardly in prison for visiting, you have direct contact. You're sitting around a table. You can hug some. But this was, hours of being able to walk around in the room and mingle and, have multiple visitors at one time.
Sit with their families.
Yeah, and that was only the graduates. The other people that were in the classes were allowed to come and attend, but they were in the back of the auditorium and you weren't allowed to go near them.
Right.
But
There's a special atmosphere.
So
yeah, it takes a lot to pull that off in a prison to allow that many visitors.
Outsiders
Yeah.
come in and
There's a
just
question.
mingle.
yeah, so if they put this degree on their resume, what is it? What does it
Cayuga
say?
Community College Associate's degree. But if they want to go to school somewhere else, they can transfer them as Cornell credits, because what they got were Cornell credits. And then Cayuga accepted them all as transfer credits.
So it's Cornell teachers coming to the jail?
And some Cayuga teachers, apparently. But yes, they have a whole, they have a whole legion of TAs and volunteers that help too. So.
And these are generalized liberal arts degrees, they're not?
Yes, yep. One of the, and Mary Katzenstein taught her prisons class there, apparently. She does a class that's kind of well known on campus about prisons.
Oh, really?
And they actually let her teach that class in the prison, which is kind of surprising to me.
Probably got some interesting questions.
Yes.
Maybe,
All right.
yeah.
And this was last Wednesday?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. And I mean, and of course it's such a pain going to a prison. They make it as like unpleasant for visitors as they can, because once you go in, they like to make you wait. Like we were waiting for, I don't know, an hour to leave. Like when we're done,
Oh.
we were like, we'd like to leave now. Oh no, we have to wait. We're doing this. We're doing that. We can't take you yet. And that's just typical prison bureaucracy, and they're not going to make exceptions. And somebody commented on how rude the guards were being, that they were just talking through the whole thing, which is also kind of typical. I mean, not that all guards are like that, but of course there would be a few.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And my cover story this week was on agriculinary tourism, and it's something that's a big thing around here already. In fact, I interviewed 2 farmers who didn't know about the county's effort to integrate all the businesses that are involved with it to make it more money-making and more attractive.
I like the little story you start off the article with.
Oh, yes. I always like to, anytime I get a chance to use David Foster Wallace, I will.
I love
And
it.
this was, and you know the Kenyon speech. I think did I ask you that?
No.
He has this famous speech that he gave, a commencement speech that he gave at Kenyon College in 2005, where he starts out telling the story of there are 2 little fish that are swimming along through the water, and an older fish comes, at them the other way and says to them, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And he swims on, and the 2 fish are swimming along, and one says to the other, "What the hell is water?" And so I use that as an example of why it has taken a long time for people around here to sort of say, let's have programs about, agriculture, because everybody takes it for granted. We've been doing progressive and innovative things with agriculture in this county for over 30 years, and it's just really burgeoning now. And so it attracted the county's attention in their strategic tourism plan for what do they want the county to be in 2020. And Tom Knipe is the guy at the county. He's in the planning department who's in charge of all this. And he organized a agriculinary task force. And so they had a public meeting, and they invited lots of members of both the tourism community, like restaurants and bed and breakfasts and other people who just receive tourists, and the agricultural community, because they don't necessarily know each other.
Right.
And so they got them all in the same room and said, mingle, come up with some business ideas. And apparently they got, a lot of really good suggestions on.
So what were some of the?
That's the thing. That's what I asked them. So what were some of them? It's like, oh, we got a lot. And they're meeting this week to take a first look at them, because people literally wrote things down. It's not like computerized or anything.
Right.
So they're going through like reams of paper. But I could tell you, just talking to the 2 farmers, for example, Melissa Madden and Garrett Miller have the Good Life Farm up in Covert, which isn't actually in the county, but that doesn't really matter so much. And they have 2 events every year: Asparaganza in the spring, and the Gifts of the Apple in the fall. And they have a CSA, which is means they have members that they distribute produce to. And these parties started out as it's kind of a gift and an appreciation to their members. Like, come on up to the farm, we'll have some music, we'll have some food, we'll have a good time. And they just advertised it by social media, and it was picked up. Melissa noticed that Finger Lakes Properties, a real estate place, had liked her Facebook page. And she started getting these people coming from all over the state to the party.
Huh.
It became a tourist attraction just because it looked like fun. Because she does everything on the farm with draft horses. And they have the cover of the paper is Melissa in one of their tunnels, which is what they call those plastic-covered
Right.
greenhouses where they extend the growing season on either direction. And they also have the Gifts of the Apples, which they canceled this year because they're building a cider tasting room. And so that's the other thing is that in order to be more visitor friendly, the farms are doing a lot of different kinds of work at the farm that visitors can come and find interesting. Because watching somebody pick an apple isn't that interesting. Although it's surprisingly interesting to people from the city, because Rita Rosenberg, who's Don Barber is her husband, they live out in Caroline, and they've got the Rose Barb Cottage, which is an old chicken coop. And they serve breakfast to the people on the first day that they're there. And most of these are families who have come to just see their farm in action. They just have like the sustainable farm. And they gather the eggs for their own breakfast from the chickens. She gets them out there digging potatoes, and she gives them a basket and tells them where Brookton's Market is through the trees and over the hills and through the woods. And she doesn't tell them there's any other food. And so they just have a grand old time out there in the country. And these are like, Cornell and Ithaca College parents.
Right.
Sometimes not from this country. And so they are on like another planet. And this is tourism. And so this is agriculinary tourism, because it's agriculture and its relationship with the restaurants and with the farmers market and really just value-added items, et cetera. And this is just going to become a policy. Right now it's just people doing it more or less on their own, but now it's going to become a kind of a concerted effort.
How to monetize it, is that?
Yeah, I mean that's actually the next step is how to help these people develop their businesses.
Right.
Right now it's just like how do you get tourists to come and give you that added revenue to help do something more with your business.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left, so.
Okay. Well, then we should talk about Trumansburg. What's going on up in Trumansburg?
Oh, well, ambulance billing is on the plan. So they've been kicking this around for a while. The village went to billing 2 years ago. I think that's right. It might have been
like that.
2011, I think.
Yeah.
They went to billing for Trumansburg. It's been an all-volunteer, free service, from probably the 60s or 70s. Mm-hmm. But that model doesn't really work anymore. So the town has come around to deciding they have to bill for ambulance service, and they're billing partly because they're missing money. They're not billing people who have insurance that would cover the ambulance service. So that's revenue that they're not getting. The pushback from people who live in Trumansburg and Ulysses has been that they don't want people not taking the ambulance because they're afraid they can't afford it. And there seems to be, Brian Snyder, who's the head of the ambulance service for the village, said that when they did go to billing in the village, there was a dip in the number of calls. But he said that while it was equal between municipalities who billed and those who didn't, so it couldn't have been caused by the fact that they went to billing.
How
Alan,
much do
sorry?
ambulance rides cost? Sorry.
Around $600 to $800, depending on how far you're going. And most insurance will pay for it, or pay most of it. But it's pretty hefty. I mean, considering the equipment, the high-tech equipment that's life-saving equipment on there, it'll cost you $600 just to roll out the door in your ambulance.
Okay. So where are they? What's the?
So they're
now?
looking at having another public hearing, getting the resolution written, and then probably going to billing in January.
Okay.
And as soon as they pass the resolution, then the bills will start to arrive.
Okay. Well,
About 1 minute.
Yeah. Quickly, this sounds like it's going to be a continuing story. What about football?
Football.
Just 30 seconds.
Trumansburg schools voted to merge with South Seneca so that they could have a full football team. They didn't have a varsity football team this year because they didn't have enough kids sign up. But
Okay.
if they merge with South Seneca, then they've got almost, 35 to 40 kids.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about that more in the future because that may happen elsewhere as well. And we're also talking about going to 8-person football teams and things like that. So going to wrap it up here and say goodbye. Thank you for watching.
We need to thank our sponsor.
We should thank our sponsor. I did it last week. Thank you, Joe Scaglione of 4D Photography, for the opening montage. And I was joking about getting a winter's montage, but maybe I'm not.
Happy
thank
holidays.
you. Yeah, happy holidays, and we'll see you. We're not going to be here next week, but we'll be here with a special one where our readers' rights people will be reading their poetry and writing they've submitted for that issue a couple weeks from now. So thank you and goodbye.